We are going to get started with the combined credit union analytics user group meeting today. In just a few minutes, we're waiting for a few more people to log in. We will be sending out both the slide deck and the video recording after this call, so stay tuned and we'll be right back. Hello and welcome to this combined meeting of the Credit Union Analytics User Group, hosted by the Tableau Credit Union User Group. We are very glad everyone could make it today. Today's topic is data governance and collaboration with Naveen Jain and Nick Ankerstad, who we'll be introducing shortly. Just a couple of quick admin notes. We will be sending out the recording as well as the slide deck for this presentation after the fact, so don't worry about screen grabbing or missing anything. We will definitely be sending that out. Just wanted to welcome you. I am Charlotte Taft, and I am the Director of Business Intelligence at Callahan & Associates and the nominal leader and logistics coordinator for the Tableau user group and Power BI user groups for credit unions. Today, we're going to be going through a couple of different things, a couple of community updates, and then jumping into the full presentation from Nick and Naveen on data governance and collaboration. We'll follow that up with a live Q&A, so please use, if you hover over the bottom of the little Zoom functionality at the bottom of the webinar screen, there's a Q&A box. If you click on that, you can enter any questions you'd like the presenters to answer. If you have issues with the technology, please go ahead and use the chat box. We look forward to having a great question and answer session and a wonderful presentation. A couple of quick community updates, very relevant with Naveen here on the phone. A number of people who have been past presenters from the various user groups will be attending and presenting at the CUlytics Summit out in Redmond or Seattle, Washington at the first week of April. It's pretty much well known to be the single best and most productive, really value-added analytics meetup among only a very few around the credit union industry. So if you are coming, please go ahead and shoot me an email. We'd love to see you. We are organizing a couple of different events. There is a networking session for the entire summit on the fourth day throughout the morning. And then we're actually hosting an in-person user group with a real focus on data visualization from 1 to 3 on Thursday. And we'd love to see everyone. If you'd like to present, that'd be even better. We're really looking to focus on different best visualizations, most impactful reports that people are using at their own institutions, and give people some ideas to share, best practices, as well as different reports maybe from around different departments. So what's really stood out for your lending folks? What are you reporting to the board? Is there something that's jet charged marketing? Those types of things. We would love to have you present, even just stop by and say hello. So we do hope to see you there. Now, just a quick reminder, this has been communicated to you through the Tableau user group mailing list and a couple of additional outreaches. We have a subgroup for Power BI users and a subgroup for Tableau users. And we're really looking to make sure that we're bringing those communities together because there are a lot of people at credit unions across the attendee base today, I'm sure, who are using all kinds of other approaches to make data matter and help return value to the member. So please do not feel like you are excluded or included by technology any more than you'd like to, because we do welcome everyone. We're looking to get more organized and continue to deliver value across everyone. So please feel free to email me if you are interested in joining our upcoming steering committee call to try and decide on some content going forward. Again, my email is in this deck that will be sent out. And on to the real show. My quick caveat as well, if you are interested in speaking at a future event, we are trying to keep these monthly to every other month. Please shoot us an email. And you can also visit the links both here and here to the various community pages. Now, on to the real show. I am thrilled to turn things over to Naveen Jain, who's the founder and CEO of CUlytics, formerly employed at credit unions and doing wonderful things with data and impact and what we can do as a collaborative industry. And he is joined and supported and will be interrogated, just kidding, by Nick Ankerstad, who's also presented in the past with us. And Nick is the senior manager of both BI and advanced analytics at Alliance out in the Chicago area. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to them real quickly. Just our logistics reminder, if you have Q&A questions, pop them in the Q&A box, which you can find by hovering on the Zoom webinar information at the bottom. And if you do have any questions, feel free to use the chat box. About quarter to the hour, we are going to switch over to full Q&A, but please don't wait. Feel free to pop it in then, and we'll see what gets answered along the way as well. Okay, over to you, Naveen and Nick.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. And thank you, Nick, for partnering with me on this presentation. Looking forward to it. Let me share my desktop. And are you able to see my slides?
Sure are.
Yes, we are.
Perfect. So wonderful. I think we will go through some introductions, a little bit more about myself, Nick, Ceolitics, and so on. We will have an overview of data governance. And I think data governance is a vast topic. And in today's session, we may not be able to get into the specific details, but we will provide an overarching overview of what data governance includes, how to define the strategies, what type of activities, artifacts, things like that. And last thing we will also talk about is that Ceolitics has taken a very community-oriented approach for data governance. And we are actually announcing this data governance application today through this webinar so that we can bring in the community, the credit union community, to contribute, learn, and share from each other so that we can all advance our data analytics practices within our respective organization. So that is a very high level agenda. There is actually a URL. You can all go to this URL, which is vote.ceolitics.com/tug. And what this URL will help us is to keep this webinar interactive. Actually, if you go there right now, there is a question that we have, which is how big is your credit union in terms of assets under management? So if you please take a minute, go to this URL and participate in this vote so that we get to know you a little better. There are a set of questions that can help us in knowing more about you so that we can tailor this webinar more to your specific needs. So while you take that, go to this URL and take that question, a little bit more about me. I used to be VP of Data Analytics at First Technology Credit Union here in San Jose, California. First Tech is one of the larger credit unions. I think they are about 13 billion in asset, number 6 in terms of size in the nation. When I joined them in 2014, they were about 7.5 billion. And I joined First Tech as a one-man army to start their data analytics practice from ground up. By the time I left in 2018, we had a team of about 15 people responsible for data governance, data management, analytics, transformation, engaging with the business functions, data science, and so on. I had pretty awesome time when I was there at First Tech, and while I was still at First Tech, we started bringing like-minded people together to host what we called at that time Credit Union Data Analytics Summit. We hosted our first summit in 2016, and it only grew from there, and now it has become a premier event. And there is actually a registration code, a discount code that you can use to register for the event, which is TUG10, and it will help save you 10% on the registration. We are looking to live stream this event. And also I know that because of the coronavirus, there are certain things which we are planning and which we are thinking about. But this event has become a premier event in the industry with 40 plus speakers. There is a fintech showcase where the leading vendors in the industry come in and showcase what they have to provide to the industry. There is a transformation challenge. There are keynotes, there are case study sessions, and of course, there is a huge opportunities for networking. The best thing about this event is there are no sales pitches. It is pure education. There are practical success stories from progressive credit unions all across the nation. And if you are interested in data analytics and digital transformation, this is a must attend event for you. So before I go for any further, why don't we go to Nick? And Nick, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Naveen. So my name is Nick Ankerstad, and I'm the Senior Manager of Advanced Analytics and Business Intelligence at Alliant Credit Union. We are, I believe, the ninth largest credit union in the United States. So we're pretty considerable size. We've passed 10 billion here a couple of years ago or a year or so ago. And my role at Alliant is really to try and help advance our analytics maturity. So I own the data science function or advanced analytics function, as well as the business intelligence function. And we're kind of organized in a slightly unique way. So I have two other counterparts, one who actually owns our data governance function, and then another counterpart who sits in our IT development that owns our information management and data services areas. So we've done some things that are more mature, and then we're more immature in other areas. So we're, like many of you, we're going through some, we're trying to build out governance frameworks and stuff like that. So throughout this discussion, I think what I will bring a little bit to what Naveen's going to mention is some of the challenges we've had, if we've overcome them, or just blatantly ask Naveen questions of how do we overcome this. So with that, Naveen, I think you got some data to share.
Wonderful,
right?
Yes. So we thank you for participating in this poll. So it looks like this is the kind of a distribution of the audience that we have. Not a whole lot of people have voted so far, but I think a good number of people are between the asset range of 1 to 5 billion. And then if you go to the next question, which business function do you represent in your organization? And looks like we have a lot of finance folks, and of course we had only limited bandwidth to list out all the business functions, so we see a lot of others out there. But this is when we think about the data governance, of course this is very key topic, especially from the finance function. But data governance and data analytics in general impacts each and every business function within the organization. So going back to our presentation, when we think about data governance, why we really think about governance and why it is becoming important for us to focus our time, energy, and resources into a function which is typically seen as taking a lot of time and energy with not as tangible output or not as sexy as some of the other business functions. Like say, for example, if you're having a conversation and if you tell someone that I'm using a machine learning or I'm using AI to build a churn model or a propensity model or to have a more intelligent collection system, you will probably get a lot of interest and a lot of wows. But when you think about the governance side, that, okay, I'm putting together energy in cleaning up my data or defining the ownership around the data or having the right data definitions, it is typically not seen as sexy as AI/ML. At the same time, all the things that we think about from the data analytics perspective, AI/ML, or when we think about even the reports and dashboards perspective, they are so heavily dependent upon data governance. If we are not able to build enough trust in the data, any data model, any report, any dashboard that we are going to build will always have doubts. People will not be trusting. How can you really trust a model that is built on top of a data which is not trusted? So that is where the data governance is key for any organization to help manage their data better. And when we talk about managing the data better, we talk about the policies and the best practices. So why do people need to invest or have a solid data governance program in place in their respective organization? And actually, while we talk about this, there is another question that we have. Where are the biggest opportunities in your organization as far as data governance is concerned? And I think those tie back to these things. So one is around increasing the value from the data. So imagine that you are working for a marketing function, and here you have put together a very nice analysis around how your prospects or your current members are engaging with you, and what exactly can you do to drive more engagement that can lead to more sticky products, or which will lead to having them more loan products or deposit products or any of those things. What I have seen is that when the data is not very well governed within the organization, invariably those conversations, instead of focusing on the analysis and the output or the insight, they get into the realm of where did you pull this data from? Looks like the data that you have used for analyzing for your analysis is not aligned with what I am seeing. And this is something which breaks down that whole analysis process. And also what it does is that anytime someone is doing that analysis, they spend enormous amount of time in first making sure that they have a common understanding around the different data elements within the organization. They pull the data together, they analyze it, share the insights, and only then they are able to put those insights into action. So having a strong data governance programs helps in getting the right value or increases the value that we can get from the data. Same thing around the managing the cost. That if we don't have a pretty good understanding and comfort or trust on the data that is we are collecting from our call center or from our branches or from other business functions, how can we think about analyzing the data to find opportunities to manage the costs? And managing the cost may come in multiple ways. They may, from when we think about the branches, it may come from how we can ask or engage with the members so that they are able to do the routine transactions through the lowest cost mediums or channels, which may very well be ATMs or digital or online banking, mobile banking, and so on. And how the branches can focus on more advisory and deepening the relationship type of engagement. Similarly, from the call center perspective, if you have a better understanding of the underlying data, you can see how can you avoid having those calls in the first place. Anytime a member calls you in your call center or anytime they walk into a branch, based on the industry averages, anytime a member walks into a branch, it costs about $10. So if there are members who are walking into your branch just to deposit a check or to withdraw $20, $100, the things that can be very well done through ATM, it is costing you money. And it is not just costing you money because it is costing them money as well. Because as a cooperative, whatever savings we have, we give it back to the members in terms of better rates, in terms of better services, and so on. And the third thing is around, of course, driving the efficiencies, that if we have a better data management practice, we are able to have higher trust in our numbers. We can show that what number of applications are coming in at the top of the funnel, how we are processing them across the board, and what exactly can we do to increase the throughput, meaning how many applications came in and how did we make a decision, and how many applications where we made a decision were accepted by the members and got resulted into a funded account is the throughput. So how can we make that whole process more efficient so that we are able to increase the throughput? From the risk perspective, yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was going to ask Naveen, so kind of out of some of these things you're mentioning here, where do you see most people starting from, like what usually in your experience, and I can chime in how that works for Alliant too afterwards, but how do you see people starting? What's usually the driver of some of this? And maybe if you know how people leverage these things to some of these almost like use cases, right, to stand up their governance program.
So typically what I have seen is, ideally I see that increase wherever there is an increase in revenue, increase in the top line or bottom line, that is what attracts the organization, the maximum attention from the executives within the organization. But more and more I have seen that it also depends upon where the organization is and overall organization structure. There are certain organizations where there are people, executive leadership team, and not all of them may be at the same level of, may not have the same level of passion. But if there are certain executives who are more passionate about data governance and how it can help their business function, then organizations tend to start with those use cases first, then the functions where the executives may be not as passionate, or executives may be a lot more uh, focused on their immediate things rather than thinking about 6 months, 12 months down the line.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we've had, yeah, no, some of the things that we've seen at Alliant is almost all these in some fashion show up. We've had things from the marketing area saying, you know, I want to make sure we're contacting only the right people, looking at things like, you know, kind of going through use cases and process flows on that side, all the way through to we hit 10 billion, which is a big regulatory threshold where, for those of you who are, I think most of you were at, what was the sizes, 1 to 5 where most of the people were? So you got a little ways to go, but once you hit 10 billion, you have to provide instrument level detail to the MCUA and the ones group. So that means you need to have data quality of hundreds of columns of all your instruments, every single one of them. And so that becomes then another use case for it. And we're in the era of hacks and all this stuff of what is it? What is the word I'm looking for? Anyways, breaches is the word I'm looking for, and data breaches and stuff like that. Security has become a big piece of that. So there are these little things where, as long as if you're the person in your organization thinking about governance and wanting to think, we need to have data quality, we need to have metadata management, we need to think about taking inventory of our data assets. One of the advice I would give is, when you hear these things like, how are we dealing with data privacy? See if you can't fit in 1 or 2 data governance wins in there. And that way, those regulatory projects and regulatory initiatives, those business value things, as long as you're kind of a stakeholder that can tweak the requirements a little bit, you can see some success from a data governance perspective. Anyways, I didn't mean to get off on my soapbox, but continue, Naveen.
No, I think what you are saying, Nick, is absolutely true. So I think those use cases can exist across any of these areas, and it all depends upon the organization immediate needs as well as the leadership team, right? So in your case, looks like the immediate need, given that you had just crossed that threshold, was more around the regulatory compliance, right? And when we think about the regulatory compliance, it is also about improving that process around the compliance or the data quality or metadata management or vendor management and so on, so that whatever effort we are putting in pulling together the data from multiple systems, and if we have a better understanding, better definitions across the board, how can we make them come together in a meaningful way so that we are improving the processes along the way. And the big part is also around the reducing the risk, because I talk to a lot of credit unions on an ongoing basis, and just recently I was talking to one of those credit unions, and they talked about how their IT team got a request to send out some sensitive member information to a third party. That third party was presumed to be a vendor who has already signed up, but they actually discovered later on that they have not really activated them as a vendor in their systems yet. So they have not gone through that whole due diligence and paperwork and all of those things to make sure that they are a vendor who can be trusted and who they can share the data with. And similarly, there are instances we are seeing that in some cases, some sensitive member information is being shared between team members through emails. And now, if Nick, you are someone who, based on your role, you should be able to see some sensitive information like the social security number, date of birth, and so on. But when it is shared through an email, then you can knowingly, unknowingly, accidentally pass on that information to someone else. And then there is no audit system in place to know where all this information is being stored. And if for whatever reason, if there is a data leak, or if there is some devices or physical devices that are misplaced, what data was on those devices, and what do the organization need to do to contain the risk exposure. And those are some of the good reasons why organizations should look into investing in data governance.
So I think we got a pretty interesting question, Naveen. So out of the three pillars, which one provides leadership buy-in? Maybe I'll tackle that one, and then you can add in kind of more broadly.
Yes.
So for us, the one that's easiest to sell is always regulatory, because with regulatory, the sales pitch is basically this: we have to do it. It's the law. So that's always an easier one. If you can get that, then it's just a matter of what is the interpretation of the law, and leave that up to legal and your compliance areas to handle. But that's always the easier one. The ones that are, in my mind, being on the analytics and BI side, not really owning governance and stuff like that. The thing that interests me more is the ROI pieces, but those tend to be like leadership gets more excited about that, but you need to make sure you're hitting the ROI targets, because otherwise next time you come in and you promise that you would deliver $1 million worth of cost savings or $1 million worth of revenue or however you're promising $1 million and you only delivered 500,000 of it, the next time you're going to end up in kind of a, yeah, you said $1 million, I'm going to take a discount factor of half of that, and then you run into issues there. So I would say the regulatory and the stuff that's like we have to do always are the things that gets done. And then the challenges are more so, is your ROI greater than everybody else's ROI? And at that point, can you deliver? Then it's more of an execution thing.
How about you? Nick, what I have seen is that those reasons may actually differ from credit union to credit union. In majority of the credit unions, actually, I see something along the same lines as what we are seeing in the votes, that we see that organizations tend to invest into governance so that they can increase the value that they are able to drive from the data, so that they can have a direct impact to the top line, so that they are not questioning any of those insights that are coming in every time. And of course, regulatory needs are important, but for whatever reason, they already trust whatever practices the regulators have put in place, and they already trust the definitions and things like that. But it is more about the wider use of the data within the organization. That is something that is the reason why they look at investing in governance. But again,
yeah, and
none of these questions are wrong.
No, and I think there's actually a Harvard Business Review article or something like that. There's a Tom Davenport article that speaks to some of that. I think he divides it into offense versus defense. So what I'm mentioning is a defensive play, right? You're worried about what will happen if I don't do this, and what you're mentioning is offense. And it completely depends on where you're at from a overall company structure.
Absolutely. So actually, there is a next question we have, and this is based on so the successful data governance program, there are three elements to it which are important. One is it should be sustainable, meaning you cannot really have a governance program where you make an initial investment and then you pull it off. It is sustained. It is a program that should not go away. It is not like okay, we are done. This is an ongoing living program. It should be embedded within the business processes, within the organization at all levels. And then there should be some sort of measurements in place so that we know that whatever investments we are making in the program, we are making some improvements along the way, whether those improvements are in terms of the compliance related issues that have been resolved, or data quality, or metadata, or it can be n number of things. But any program should have at least these three capabilities or features in place. Going to the next slide, actually, this is a data governance maturity model. We have a self-assessment for that model, and the URL is right over here. We look at organizations to be in 4 stages of maturity. And there is actually a poll that is going on over here, where you can see where you are on the maturity model. One question that I typically ask, it is almost like a litmus test, is that if you ask 5 people in your organization, how many new members joined your credit union in the last month? How many answers do you get? Typically, for when the organizations are in stage 1, they will get as many questions or maybe more questions than the number of people that question is asked. Like, how many new members joined your credit union in the last month? In stage 2, typically you will get one answer from the same business function. So if there are 5 people, but 2 of them are from finance, people in finance will have the same answer because they have the same understanding of what the definition of new member, definition of last month, the definition of the word open, and so on. And then stage three, you will start getting the alignment at the organization level. And in stage four, not only that you are aligned, but you're also optimizing that whole process, which goes around data governance. So when we think of the data governance maturity model, we look at it from the strategy perspective, from the people perspective, process, and technology. Strategy is what are the things that the data governance program should be doing and how closely aligned is it to the organizational objectives. There are a lot of times we see that when we are not taking a systematic approach around making the investment and putting a governance program in place, we tend to boil the ocean, or we tend to work on things which will not be important from the business point of view. Like say, for example, maybe in some of the other slides, we'll talk about what are the different artifacts for data governance, and one of the artifacts being the data dictionary or business catalog. And if you go about starting to define those business catalog and data dictionary terms, there are thousands of those terms, and it will become mind-boggling. But if you try to bring in some structure and understanding what are the most important initiatives in your organization, and you start defining them first before you go to the next ones. And I know that we are kind of little short on time, and I wanted to take some time to give you a very quick overview of the data governance application. So I will kind of rush through some of the next slides, but if there are any questions which are coming up, Nick, please stop me and so that we can answer those questions.
Yeah, while you're getting the next thing set up, one of the questions that they had, and I think it's directed at me, was who owns data governance in our organization? So I'll, again, mention more from an aligned perspective, and maybe Naveen, you want to add in just from an overall perspective, what you've seen. At Alliant, the data governance function reports up through the CFO's office. I also report up through the CFO's office. That's kind of so within finance is where it sits.
So I think when we think about actually this is a slide more around the organization of the data governance program. And ideally I see that there can be one or more than one executive leaders who can be the executive sponsor of the overall data governance program. In addition to that, so these are and the next level is the data governance steering council. This is typically the business function leaders from each of the business functions, whether it is lending or mortgages or collections or deposits or each of the channels, branches, digital, call center, operations, and so on. And they form the steering council. And then we have data owners. So data owners are the business users who benefit the most from the data governance practice, and they are the one who should be responsible in driving the policies and the definitions and the standards around their business function, around the data sources that are contained or that they are using within their business function. Data stewards are business users, and these are the people who understand the nitty-gritty details around the different data elements within the organization or within the database. And then we have subject matter experts and custodians. Subject matter experts are either they can be technical people who know where the data is stored, who can help understand the tables and rows and so on. And the custodians are people, typically the DBAs, who have the understanding around how the data is physically stored, meaning is it stored in the cloud, is it stored on a server, where on the server is it stored, and how it is protected, what type of backup, retention, other policies is it adhering to, and things like that. So data owners on the one hand are defining the policies, and the custodians on the other hand are making sure that whatever policies are being defined are adhered to on the technology side. So in a typical organization, the executive sponsors, again, it depends, it varies from organization to organization, but typically more often than less, I see CFOs playing a very important role given that function, given that they have a lot of requirements around the regulatory needs, given that they are keeping a close watch on the top line and bottom line of the organization, they are playing that role of an executive sponsor. Sometimes there are more than one executive sponsor. In some cases, we have seen CFO and CIO playing a role, or CMO or CFO playing a role, but it all depends upon a specific organization. There is no like a set rule where we say that, okay, this is the role that you should really be the executive sponsor. Does that answer that question? Nick, do you have any other question?
Yeah. No. No.
So I think in essence of time, I would like to maybe fast track a little bit, because I think there are the four main artifacts around getting started on the data governance. One is around the data quality issue tracking, the reference data management, the data sources, and the people's roles and responsibilities. But one thing that I would like to do now is to introduce the audience to the Analytics data governance application. So this is a collaborative data governance application that we have developed. There are two views to this application. One is the credit union community view. And when we say the credit union community, meaning this is almost like a crowdsourced version of the business glossary, of the data dictionary, of the data sources. Any credit union team member can join. So you can join. And people, when they are joining in, they can contribute the terms in draft status to the crowdsourced edition. And then selected community leaders have admin rights to approve and manage the terms that the industry as a whole has contributed. We do have one of the administrators for the data governance application over here, Mike Lindbergh from Wings Financial Credit Union. I don't know, Mike, if you are here, and maybe at one point I would love to have you share your thoughts around this application.
Sure thing. And Naveen, I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Wonderful.
Awesome. Yeah, so I was asked to help steward some of these definitions from the collaborative version, and I'm really excited about this. Wings has been on the analytics path for quite some time, and benefited greatly from the collaboration that we've seen with other credit unions, and kind of how we've learned from others, and how others have learned from us. So I'm really excited about seeing this business glossary play out as kind of we as analytics professionals decide to kind of live the cooperative spirit and build out these definitions together. One other point that I wanted to make before I stop talking is, simply stated from an individual organization standpoint, sometimes it can be hard to know what terms to start with, how to get buy-in from senior leaders or the folks at your organization. How can they build confidence that this is the right definition? And I think the collaboration across credit unions afford us the opportunity to kind of drive home that confidence that this has been reviewed by other credit unions that may be more mature in the process, or a little bit further down, and we've validated our definitions in similar organizations. So I'm really excited to see how this plays out and how it gets used as a community.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mike. So basically, here are the community business glossary listing. Here is the data dictionary listing and the data source listing. So when you look at the data, and right now I'm logged in as a general user, not as an admin. So I can look at adding a new glossary term. And when I try to add a new glossary term, the status is defaulted to draft and I cannot change it. I can look at the previously added terms. So for example, if I see that this term person-to-person payment is not available in the glossary, I can recommend this term, and the administrators are going to look at it. They may change the definition, they may change, or they may approve it as is. And when it is approved, then it gets added into the industry glossary listing. This glossary listing, you can, of course, do search. There is extensive search around the functional areas, around the category, around the security classification. Actually, security classification is pretty interesting because what it really tells is that, is it a term that is used for internal use, meaning it is within the organization? Is it something which is confidential, where it has some sensitive information, or is it something which is super secret? So there are some of those definitions that we have defined, and we are open for your input as you look at it. Similarly, we have the dictionary listings, which is what are the and different terms within the industry that are being used. And for each of those terms, what is the functional area, what is the category, what is the data type for that term. Again, you can recommend a new industry term for dictionary. Then there are listing of data sources. I think this is one big area where I see most of the organizations, especially when they are getting started on the governance, having a challenge. Like when I joined First Tech as in the responsible for data analytics, my first question was, how much data are we talking about? And I knew that most of the people, they had a good understanding of the data sources within the function that they were using, but across the organization, as we started cataloging, we identified more than 80 different first-party data sources. So here is just a general listing, but the key over here is that you can take or use these business terms, but then you can create the glossary terms or the data sources which are very specific to your credit union. For example, when we think about core banking over here, the core banking system may not provide the vendor name and commercial name because each organization may have a different vendor name and commercial name for it. But when you look at the My Credit Union data source listing, and this is for one of the credit unions, you can not only see all the applications, as well as the vendor names, as well as the commercial name, data owners, data stewards, and subject matter experts, and so on. And the key over here is that you have access only to the information for your credit union and not for anyone else. So that the information that you're putting in this application, which is specific for your credit union, only you and your team has access to it, and no one else has access to it. If I come and log in as an admin user, I will see a little different view. So this is the view that Michael is able to see, that not only can he create a new term, but he can look at the pending approval terms. And he can see that this is a term that was added, and he can go over here, he can edit this term, and he can update the term name, definition, he can look at the status and update it to approved, what functional area it is from, what synonym, antonym, or what are the use cases or sources it has, and also what is that security classification, is it internal use, general use, confidential, and so on. And he can update it over here. And once it is updated, it goes away from the pending glossary terms and it shows up in the business glossary listing. Same thing happens for the dictionary terms over here. And given that Mike is working with Wings Financial Credit Union, any of the listing that he sees over here is going to be for Wings Financial Credit Union and not for any other credit union. That way he has full access not only to the community one, but also to the specific credit union. So this application has been created to help you get started on your data governance program. It is not in any ways or form going to be an alternative to some of the more advanced metadata discovery and data governance application, but we see this as an application that can help you get started in the right path. So as I said, like, you can sign up today, and there is a poll which is going on as we speak. Would you be interested in a free trial for this data governance application? If yes, please let us know, and we will send you an invitation to this application. So with this, there are a few other questions we have over here. Um, what would you like to see next in our webinar series? Um, please take some time to respond to them. And while we go through these poll questions, um, Nick, maybe this is also the time, and Charlotte, this is the time when we can start thinking about wrapping up and taking the open Q&A. But there is a lot of other things. If there are no Q&A questions, we can go back to the presentation and we can talk about the slides that we skipped.
Yeah, Naveen, I think we've answered a couple of questions. So I think you can keep going with the presentation, and then if there are more questions, I'll stop you.
Okay. So I think we kind of were right over here when we were thinking about the governance founding principles. So what are some of the things which are very important when we are putting together a data governance program? And I think any program, and more so with the data governance program, it starts with the leadership alignment and the strategy. I think we need to make sure that the leadership team is committed and aligned around the value that the governance program is going to bring to the organization, as well as the governance program that is being put in place should be aligned with the overall business strategy. The second point around the principle is around the business driven. That data governance program, a lot of times people incorrectly think of it to be a technical initiative, which is not, and it should not be. If there is a governance program which is technology team driven or IT driven, then it is a lot more likely to fail, and it is a lot more less likely to deliver the expected value. So it is very important to align and engage with your business teams when you are working on the data governance program. The third one is around the shared responsibility. So even though the program by itself is business driven, but there is a shared responsibility. And number 3 and number 4 kind of go hand in hand, that there is a shared responsibility across entire uh, all different layers within the organization and across the business function. Data is not one thing which is uh, where only one business function is dependent on it. Data analytics touches each and every business function within the organization. It touches every channel, whether it is branches, call center, ATMs, digital, and it touches each and every product: lending, mortgage, investment, insurance, deposits, anything. It touches each and every back office operations, including finance, marketing, of operations, and so on. So similarly, from the governance perspective, it has to be a shared responsibility across all the different business functions, and it has to be multi-layered. It should be across all the layers within the organization. To make sure that you are engaging and people across the organization, different business functions are engaged, and people across the different layers are engaged, there is a need to have a framework-based governance program in place. Because if we don't have a framework, and when we talk about the framework, what we mean is the operating framework, that we should have some sort of structure around, okay, what is the charter of a steering committee? What are they responsible for? How often they will meet? What type of questions they will take on, and how will they respond to those things? For example, in some organizations, I have seen that you have senior leadership team getting together as a steering council meeting and working hours and hours and defining the terms. Is that the right use of the leadership team, or is it something where they should depute someone from their business functions and let them manage the definitions of the different data elements, and then come back to them and report on those definitions? And if there are any conflicts, if there are any differences, then the steering committee comes in and provides that input to them. Then the number 6 is principle based, meaning it should be based on certain principles which should be aligned with the overall strategy in the organization, so that it is not something where they are trying to boil the ocean. Because if you try to boil the ocean, first thing is there are so much different data elements available, so much of data available in any organization, whether it is big or small. And if there are no defining principles, it may become too big of a task with very little value that you are able to deliver. when we think about the overall scope, I think we, of course, start with the strategy, and then we think about the policies that should be put in place so that we are able to manage the standards, the quality. There should be appropriate oversight on top of the data governance activities, and then there has to be some sort of audit compliance requirements so that we are able to manage and report on those. And issue management becomes a pretty important aspect, that if there are any variances, if there are any differences that we are finding as part of this process, how are we going to manage and resolve those issues as they come across? So let me take a pause here and see, Nick, do you see any questions over there?
I've got one, Naveen.
Sure.
Often you kind of hear horror stories about how you can really enlist, your various department or pillar leaders to agree on definitions. Starting with just what is a member, or for example, what's the start date of an account between different departments. Can you give any insight into either stories you've learned from experience or from people you've worked with that can help people really manage those kind of discussions? That sometimes that is managing up for people in these groups, I know.
Sure. So the few examples actually. One is that I was working with this particular credit union, and they had a 11.5-page document full of queries. And there was one person who would run those queries every month. It would take her about 2.5 days to calculate how many new members joined the credit union in the last month. So now imagine that this is the type of information that the leadership team is typically looking, so that they are able to make some adjustments in their overall process or in their approach or in their marketing campaign and so on. But if getting to this information is so hard, how can we expect the organizations to be more data driven so that they are able to use more of this trusted data to make those decisions, right? Another interesting story is that another credit union that I worked with, they had a performance report that they would send out to the entire leadership team every month. They will send this report out on 22nd of the month. It will take about 20 to 30 person days to create that performance report every month. The interesting part is that the person who was putting this report together had very little trust in the numbers that she was putting in the report. She basically said that I was new to the organization. The person who was responsible for putting this dashboard together or report together, he quit, he moved on. And when he quit, I was asked to do the knowledge transfer. So he provided me all these queries. So I go to core banking, run this query. I go to loan origination, I run this query. I bring the data together, but I don't know why I'm doing all of these things and who is benefiting from it. And I don't even think that I can really stand behind the numbers that I'm reporting. So we actually went back to the leadership team and asked, like, who, can you please raise your hands and tell us who is really using this report? And if no one is really using this report, we are going to shut it down. And we, out of about 10 different business functions, we had one person, one business function, which was branches, who said, yes, this is something that is useful to us. But by the way, it does not provide all the information that we are looking for. So I think that is where that having a data governance practice, having that steering committee, so that I have the leadership team talking with each other, amongst each other, so that there is a clear understanding of what is important for them and have a clear direction to the data analytics team in what it should be reporting on, what should it be analyzing, and how the business users are going to use that information. Does that answer your question, Charlotte?
Absolutely.
So when we think about the governance strategy, there are few areas. One is, of course, defining the overall charter and the vision for the program. Then we need to think about having the operating framework and defining the responsibilities. Who is responsible for what areas, those type of things. Some of those responsibilities are going to be shared responsibilities. There cannot be one function which is responsible, for example, for the core banking. There is not one function who should go and define the term member. Some of those definitions require an understanding and agreement across multiple business functions so that we are all on the same page. I remember at First Stack, we spent multiple meetings with the senior leadership team in defining the term member. At another credit union that I worked with, we had not as many meetings, but we had one meeting where we looked at the credit union bylaws and we agreed to the term. And what was interesting about this credit union is that they had their incentive plan based on the number of members, or based on the membership growth. And every month they will publish three numbers: one, which is trending up; second, which is constant; and third, which is trending down. And then they will choose, of course, one number which is trending up for their incentive planning calculations. After this meeting, we agreed that instead of having three different numbers, we should use one number. We should agree on the definition of the member, and we should report on the things that we can all trust and believe. Then there should be an implementation roadmap when you think about the strategy. And then, of course, there should be overall operational success that should be planned. There should be a plan for that. Few activities, I think, developing the policies and procedures, defining the people's roles, responsibilities, and aligning with them. And I think the most important thing is the organizational change management, because when we think about the governance, there is a lot of communication that is happening around the definitions, around the business glossary, dictionary, data sources, and so on. And there is a need to have a framework in place so that the organization as a whole is involved and engaged in the change management process. We already talked about the organization, and here are some of the artifacts that we should think about. At least the data quality, issue tracking, the reference data management, the data source management is the important part, and of course the people roles and responsibilities. And then from the organization touch points, I think of course data touches each and every person's function, but there is an important touch point around the vendor management, that we all work with a lot of third-party vendors. Either they have the softwares deployed within the organization or they are in the cloud more and more. So when we are thinking or engaging with those vendors, how we should have the appropriate conversations with them to make sure that if they are in the cloud, how the data in the cloud is being protected, secured, managed, as well as how organization get access to the data so that they can get appropriate insights from it. Similarly, if the data is in-house, even if the vendor application is in-house, what are the best ways so that the data can be exported out from those applications so that it can be integrated with other data sources to have a more complete information about our members, about our prospects, about our team members, and so on. Similarly, there should be a touch. Yeah. So was there a question?
Oh, no.
So I think very quickly, I know we are just out of time. There should be a focus around the budget and the funding. Regulatory compliance is a big part. I think Nick, you definitely mentioned about it. And at the end of the day, data management and integration plays a very, very important role when we think about the governance as a whole. So very quickly, I think there are a few other questions that we have. It looks like we are hearing some things around what are some of the next topics that we would like to see in the webinar series. Thank you. I think this is a good set of responses. What is one key takeaway from this session? I would love to hear more from you about what is one thing that you would like. What is one thing that you think you took away from this session so that we can do more of what you like and what you are able to take away? And then there is one last question we have, which is, was this session useful to you? I think your votes are very important for us. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, Nick, for your for partnering with us on this.
Yes, thank you so much, Naveen and Nick. This was truly wonderful. Thank you for everybody who joined us today. There will be upcoming events coming up, both between Power BI, Tableau, and our combined user group, including we're going to do an Ask Me Anything with a BI leader and his team, so you can ask about really specific questions that hit at the heart of what different people on these teams are doing. We are having the in-person user group meetup at the Analytics Summit We're going to do some really targeted Tableau Power BI technical question sessions, and then a larger discussion into the question of how do you make analytics contagious at your institution in the best sense. Maybe that is not the quote we're going to use for the next few months, but thank you to everybody who joined. Thank you again to Naveen and Nick and to the Tableau event staff who help us organize all these things. Again, if you'd like to join the dedicated mailing list, you'll find the links in the deck we're going to send out, as well as the recording, which should come out in the next day or so. Thanks again. Stay tuned for future events and have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.